We continued to drift through the vast, empty expanse of space, a place that felt endless, like time itself had no meaning here. The silence was only interrupted by the soft hum of our thoughts, but even then, it felt like we were suspended in some forgotten corner of existence. Timothy broke the silence, his voice low and somewhat hesitant as he began to speak about his mother.
My mom.
Before she passed, he began, trailing off as if the words were heavy, reluctant to leave his mouth. I nodded, offering him the space to speak, my mind already bracing for the gravity of what was to come. Timothy shifted slightly, a faint smile tugging at his lips, though it didn't reach his mouth. The other gods seem like dicks, he said with a small laugh, a sound that didn't quite match the sadness in his voice. I couldn't help but chuckle in return, though my laughter was more out of understanding than amusement. They are, I agreed softly, the words hanging in the air. But the gods. They're complicated creatures, all destined for the same fate. Timothy didn't respond immediately. Instead, he lifted his head, eyes narrowing slightly as he seemed to ponder something deeper, something unsaid. What is death like? He asked, the question so raw and earnest that it seemed to vibrate through the quiet between us. I couldn't tell if he was asking about what death meant for humans, or if he was searching for something more personal, something tied to his own grief. I met his gaze, unsure of how to answer. What do you mean? I asked gently, hoping he would elaborate. Timothy's voice dropped lower, as if the question weighed more heavily now. What's next? He repeated, his voice faltering at the end. The uncertainty in his tone was palpable, and I knew immediately what he was really asking. He wasn't just curious about the abstract concept of death, he wanted to know if there was something more, something beyond the finality of his mother's passing. He wanted to believe that she had found peace, that she had gone somewhere better. I inhaled slowly, gathering my thoughts. This wasn't a question that could be answered easily, but I could feel the depth of his pain, his desperate hope. For humans, death. It's many things, I began, choosing my words carefully. It's not as simple as there's only one road to take. There are many paths, each one different. It's up to the person, to what they believe, to which path they choose to walk through. Timothy's head dropped a little, his gaze flickering downward, almost as if he was trying to push the weight of his emotions back down, to hold them inside. But I could see the tension in his posture, the way he was fighting something that wanted to break free. He wanted to ask something. I could tell. His mouth opened slightly, as if the words were there, right on the tip of his tongue, but for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to speak them. The silence between us stretched again, thick with unspoken things. I took a deep breath. You didn't know your mother was going to kill herself, I said softly, more a statement than a question, but one I felt was important to say. I needed to understand him better, needed him to know that I wasn't going to shy away from the dark parts of his past. I needed to acknowledge the weight of what he was carrying. Timothy froze for a moment, his eyes flickering with something, surprise, perhaps, or fear, but then he exhaled shakily and met my gaze. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, but he forced the words out, each one clear and deliberate. Yes, I did. The confession hung in the air, raw and jagged, as if he had just opened a wound that had been festering for far too long. He breathed deeply, struggling to keep it together, before releasing a long, shaky breath. The tension in his shoulders melted just a little, but I could see how much he was still holding in. He began to tell me about his mother's final days. His voice was distant at first, as if recounting something that was still too painful to relive. He explained how, deep down, he knew something was wrong, that his mother was slipping away from him. But instead of confronting the truth, he had buried his instincts, choosing to ignore the signs, the subtle shifts in her behavior that told him something terrible was coming. It was easier to pretend everything was fine, easier to ignore the way her words grew darker, how her mood grew more erratic. It wasn't until it was too late that he finally allowed himself to see it, to understand that the inevitable had been in front of him all along. He had chosen to be ignorant, to live in a state of denial. And now, in the silence between us, the weight of that choice seemed unbearable. He was struggling not only with his mother's death, but with the guilt of knowing he could have done more, should have done more. And yet, he hadn't. In that moment, I understood him better than I ever thought I would. The pain, the shame, the longing for something he could never have back. It was all there, raw and unspoken, yet so clear in the way he held himself, so tense, so careful. And I realized, in the vastness of the empty space around us, that sometimes, the hardest thing to face is not death itself, but the questions and the what-ifs that come with it. Her day started out just like any other, a predictable rhythm that provided her with a sense of comfort. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as she prepared breakfast, the familiar sounds of sizzling bacon and the gentle hum of the coffee maker filling the air. She felt a presence, almost divine, whispering reassurance, giving her the freedom to continue on with her routine. After breakfast, she tackled her chores with a sense of duty, washing the dishes, dusting the shelves, and folding the laundry, each action performed as a ritual that brought her peace of mind. Later, she settled into her favorite chair to watch TV, allowing the characters on the screen to momentarily distract her from any worries. Meanwhile, Timothy emerged from the bedroom, still groggy from sleep. He shuffled over to his mother and pressed a soft kiss onto her head, an unspoken bond of love and respect between them. "Goodbye, Mom," he said, his voice still thick with morning sleep. She waved him off with a faint smile, her mind wandering elsewhere, a subtle distance in her demeanor that he didn't yet recognize. That afternoon, as she moved about the apartment, something felt different. With each swipe of the cloth on the dusty window, she lost herself in thoughts she couldn't quite grasp, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the flickering TV screen, a half-hearted attempt to engage with the show. There was a noticeable lack of passion in her cleaning. It was as if she were on autopilot, going through the motions without truly participating in them. Timothy, burdened by his own concerns, sensed a shift in her energy but dismissed it, choosing to carry his own troubles instead. The day stretched on, and Timothy spent his afternoon wandering through the park, the sun shining down on a seemingly ordinary day. He watched children play and couples stroll hand in hand, but none of it resonated with him. Every now and then, he would glance at the ground, feeling a need to check in but convincing himself that all was well at home. As night fell, he returned to the apartment, the faint glow of streetlights illuminating the familiar path. However, as he drew closer, an unsettling sight greeted him. The police cars lined up outside the building, their lights flashing violently against the darkness. Timothy's heart raced. His first thought was that maybe someone had slipped or fallen. Perhaps it was the elderly woman who lived downstairs, always complaining about her joints. But as he approached the entrance, the mood shifted ominously. Officers moved about purposefully, their faces serious. Before he could even reach the door to his mother's apartment, an officer intercepted him, pulling him aside with a firm grip, a look of concern etched across their features. "You need to step back," the officer said, the words heavy with implications. Distress tightened in his chest as he caught sight of the landlord, a stoic figure shrouded in shadows, standing at the edge of the commotion, shaking his head slowly. In that moment, Timothy's world transformed from the mundane to the unimaginable, a single horrifying thought piercing through the chaos. Something terrible had happened to his mother. Time seemed to freeze as Timothy stood frozen in disbelief, grappling with the horror of what lay before him. His mind raced in chaos, uncertainty looming overhead like an ominous storm cloud threatening to unleash a deluge of despair. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked for the first time, his voice steady yet bewildered, as a police officer gently pulled him away from the chaotic scene unfolding before him. But as he repeated the question, anxiety crept into his tone, morphing it into a desperate plea. There, resting still on a chair with a white sheet draped over her, was a lifeless figure, the phantom of his mother. The stark contrast of the blue and white surrounding her only deepened the sense of loss. Her finger, adorned with a unique ring, glinted in the harsh light, a cherished gift from his father, now a haunting reminder of their shattered lives. Timothy felt as though the ground beneath him had crumbled away. His heart raced with despair, and he couldn't contain the raw emotion surging through him. "Mom! Mom!" he cried, his voice breaking, as if calling out could somehow summon her back from the void. In that heart-wrenching moment, it felt as though the entire universe had collapsed, leaving nothing but a gaping wound in his soul. The calamity around him faded away as the weight of his grief settled in, and he was consumed by the realization that everything had changed forever. Days turned into an endless echo of sorrow since that tragic day, making him feel as if the apocalypse loomed just beyond the horizon. The world, once vibrant and alive, now felt like it was drawing its last breath, with Gaia herself seeming to surrender her air. As I glanced at him, I noticed how he tucked his head between his arms, seeking solace in a makeshift barrier against the world, an instinctive retreat from the painful reality he was forced to confront. My voice cut through the thick air, heavy with emotion, yet it held an odd comfort in its rawness. We are not all golden, Timothy. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to feel blue even when the sun is shining. It's okay to lie to yourself when the world feels too heavy to bear. These are the principles of humanity, and we are all bound by them. Don't shame yourself for feeling broken. It's a part of who you are. I paused, his words hanging in the air like a delicate thread between two worlds. Being stuck on that island of insanity, screaming out for someone to hear your pain. That's the horrid vanity we all face. To feel as if you are the last blue jay on a dying tree, wings heavy with the weight of your own sadness, your feet too tired to keep dancing. And yet you continue, hiding tears that no one sees, tears that seem to fall endlessly like rain in a forgotten forest. I could see the weight of his words settle on Timothy, and though he hadn't spoken, I knew he was listening. Your days are not always perfect. You are not always perfect. Just as the moon is not always full, and the sun doesn't shine every moment of every day. We are all in flux, sometimes too bright, sometimes too dark, but always shifting. Don't try to hide from it. Accept it. Swallow that bitter red pill, Timothy. It's the only way to move forward. I looked at him, the truth of my words raw but honest. And let your mother rest in peace. But remember this, if you find peace within yourself, she will be at peace, too. Timothy's eyes were glassy, a mix of disbelief and sorrow. He shook his head slightly, muttering to himself, I destroy the world. All because of my heart. I felt a pang of understanding, of shared pain. We all would, Timothy. If we bore the weight of this power, we'd all be capable of it. But you have the ability to change your actions. It's not too late. His eyes met mine, a flicker of doubt in them, and then he asked, his voice low and skeptical, how? Without a word, I floated towards him, my feet lifting off the ground as I reached for his hands. He hesitated for a moment but allowed me to take hold, the tension in his fingers melting as he felt the connection. We are the gods of man, I said, my voice taking on an eerie, bone-chilling tone, as if the weight of eternity itself was slipping through my lips. And then, together, we opened our palms. From our joined hands, a small fragment of earth began to form, twisting and growing. At first, it was a tiny spark, a seed of something that hadn't existed before. But soon, the earth itself began to take shape, vast, sprawling, and beautiful. The world was born in a moment, the continents and oceans sweeping into place beneath our fingers. The sun appeared from behind us, rising like a golden titan, its light enveloping everything in a warm embrace. To our right, the moon slid into view, a pale and quiet guardian of the night. Stars flickered into existence, dotting the blackness like scattered diamonds, illuminating the celestial belt, weaving the fabric of space back together in one breathtaking sweep. This is not your original reality, Timothy, I said, my voice softer now, as I watched the new world take shape. But you have to live with it. This is what you've created. This is the world where you can heal. Timothy stood in stunned silence, his breath shaky as he absorbed the enormity of what had just happened. And then, something in his expression shifted. A smile, small but genuine, formed on his lips. It was as though the weight of the world had momentarily lifted from his shoulders. In this reality, Timothy said, his voice steady, I'm not alone. I have you. I have a brother and sister out there somewhere. And so much more. I'm not just a soul adrift anymore. It was awe-inspiring to witness it, to watch a human being so suddenly and profoundly grow, not just physically, but spiritually. In moments, he had evolved, transcended. It was something gods themselves would envy, a depth of transformation no divine being could achieve in the span of a single heartbeat. I smiled back at him, a feeling of warmth spreading through me, a sense of fulfillment that was rare even for beings like us. Together, we had created something beautiful, a new world and a new beginning for him. It felt like the culmination of a long journey, one that I had never expected to travel with another soul. But here we were, slowly, We began to float back down towards the earth, back to where it all started. Timothy seemed lighter, somehow, as if his burdens had been washed away by the very reality he had created. And I realized, with quiet certainty, that this was the beginning of something new. I was proud, no, honored, to call him my brother. And as we landed, ready to face whatever would come next, I knew this was only the start of a journey neither of us had ever expected, but one we were both ready for.